The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
I am 66 years old. I have a stated goal of 100. I don't know whether I'll get to 100, but I can be pretty sure that in my lifetime, I'm going to see a $1 billion contract for an athlete. Wow. Juan Soto, 15 years, $765 million, $325 million more than what the Nationals offered him on an extension just 2 years ago. And the $325 million difference is the same deal that Bryce Harper got to go to the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, it's insanity. And what you had was a billionaire in Steve Cohen who was not going to be outbid because the Yankees were willing to come very close. They came up $5 million short of that. And unlike the deal for Shohei Ohtani last year, which was $700 million, true, it was a shorter length of time, 10 years, but $680 million deferred, no deferred money in this. And on top of that, Soto has an opt-out after 5 years, and if he elects to stay with the Yankees, it bumps up to $800 million. Wow. And is it possible that they'll have to go higher than that? Because 5 years down the road, somebody may have an $800 million plus contract. I don't know who, and maybe it's the perfect storm here and that you've got a guy who's 26 years old, and he's going to be a reasonable age when the deal runs out. He'd be 41 instead of, signing a guy Ohtani's age. I think he was 29 when he signed it last year, so he'll be close to 40 when it's up, and if it was 15 years, it's mid-40s. But still, whatever it is, it's a hell of a lot of money. It's $51 million guaranteed every year for the next 15 years. Wow, that is incredible. I'm going to give you the background on how these deals have ramped up and how quickly they have, because believe it or not, it was less than 45 years ago, or about 45 years ago, where we did not have the $1 million a year player. So in less than half a century, we're up to tickling $1 billion in a contract when $4.5 million blew it out of the water. I'll get to that coming up. But this is last night, Scott Van Pelt doing his show, and after he picked his jaw off the floor, he talked about the contract with Jeff Passan, who's covering the winter meetings in Dallas where the deal was signed with the Mets.
I think I can figure out what sorted this out, Jeff, and it's the money. It's always the money. But this is a conversation that involved many different teams, many different suitors. What ultimately led the Mets to get to a place that others would not get?
The Mets weren't that much at a different place, Scott, than the New York Yankees were. The Yankees had a $760 million offer, only $5 million less, spread out over 16 years. So it wasn't a huge demonstrable difference. In the end, I think Juan Soto looked at the New York Mets future and looked at the New York Yankees future and believed that the Mets have a better future than the Yankees, which is a wild thing to think, right? The Yankees have been the most successful franchise in North American professional sports history. They have 27 championships. The New York Mets have been the New York Mets. And so to see the transformation that Steve Cohen has helped make with this franchise over the last 4 years after he bought it, to turn them from laughingstock into the team that Juan Soto wants to play with because he believes that they are going to have a brighter future, speaks volumes about what he has been able to do since he has bought the team. And this, I think, is just the beginning. They are going to spend more money. They are going to continue to have payrolls like this. And to spend $765 million to be up potentially at $805 million, it seems unfathomable, but that is how ultimately the New York Mets got Juan Soto.
I think we're all probably fairly numb to these numbers because they're just so far out in the stratosphere that it's hard to even make them make sense. I just am interested, Jeff, And your reaction to this, first of all, like, it's what, 15 years? He's not playing when he's 40. And if he is, he's not this guy. But that's Steve Cohen's issue, not yours or mine. What's your reaction to this dollar amount for this player?
It's more than I thought it was going to be. You know, coming into this offseason, I figured it was going to land somewhere around $625 million. Because the number $700 million, Scott, like, let's remember, Shohei Ohtani got that last winter, but 97.1% of that money is deferred 10 years out. So the actual, like, present-day value of Ohtani's contract was closer to $470 million. But what Soto had going for him in the end was his age. It is extraordinarily rare to see a 26-year-old free agent. It is even rare to see a 26-year-old free agent the caliber of Juan Soto. The last time we saw someone as good as him on the field hit free agency at that age was 24 years ago here in Dallas, Texas, when Alex Rodriguez signed with the Rangers for 10 years and $252 million. And to me, this contract is the equivalent of that. It's a shock to the system, and it's it's an arrival of this money that we couldn't have possibly conceived or fathomed.
I'll close with this quick thought. The Yankees are still the Yankees. There's no singular move that renders them, they're not neutered by any stretch. They're still the Yankees. But you lose this guy, you're not better. How do they react to this news?
I think the Yankees react by saying we have an opportunity now. And, we can look 5, 10, 15 years down the road, Scott, and this may have been the best deal that the Yankees never did. Because let's not forget what October was like for them. Juan Soto was the only guy who was hitting, yes. But that shows you there are other problems on this team. There are other holes on this team that can be filled. And Corbin Burns is a free agent. And Max Fried is a free agent. And Alex Bregman is a free agent. And Pete Alonso is a free agent. I can go on and on. Okay. No one's Juan Soto. I'm not saying that. But the Yankees, if they take some of that $760 million that they offered Juan Soto and go out and sign a few free agents, maybe bring in Christian Walker as well, like, there are a lot of possibilities for the Yankees to make a team in 2025 that is better than the one that they would have if they had only brought Juan Soto back on a $700 million plus team.
Yeah, and look, he's a generational hitter. There's no question about it. He's not a great outfielder. He's not a great base runner. He ain't Willie Mays. But as a hitter, he's of great value, so much so that do you want to run the risk of him turning an ankle, running down a fly ball in the outfield? I mean, you got to protect your investment. Does he spend the bulk of those 15 years of the contract as a designated hitter? I think you got to think about doing that, right? Because you can't lose his bat. If he goes on the injured list for a couple of weeks, think about the amount of money that's going out the window that you're paying him not to play. He has been healthy, and that's been a plus. And as Passan mentioned, he was productive in the postseason for the Yankees. That helped him. But just look at the way these deals have ramped up in a short period of time. And Mike Trout signed with the Angels. Now, that was 5 years ago, 2019. $426.5 million, which has proven to be an awful investment for the Angels. They've been a bad team, and he's hurt all the time. That was a disaster for them. More recently, Aaron Judge going up to $360 million 2 years ago. Mookie Betts, just before that, $365 million. And then the Shohei Ohtani deal last year with the Dodgers, which, was based on him being a unicorn, right? I mean, it was like, oh, yeah, it's $700 million, but he's a pitcher, too. I mean, think about a guy who's capable of winning the home run title, the stolen base title, and the Cy Young all in the same year. That's Shohei Ohtani. So you give him $700 million. And when you started talking about Juan Soto coming up for free agency, yeah, more likely it's going to start with a 5. Maybe it gets to a 6, gets to a 7, and it's closer to 8 than it is to 7. And if he's any good at all, and he is, let's say he doesn't fall off the table, he's certainly going to opt out after 5 years and bump it up to $800 million or maybe more, because he'll have bidders from other teams. Maybe the Yankees want to get back in it. He doesn't even have to move. Stays in New York. Who knows? It's just insanity. And, just to tell you what I've seen in my lifetime, Reggie was the first real eye-opening free agent deal. Now, there were a couple of others that were signed before that, as baseball had free agency as of 1976. So Andy Messerschmidt got a big deal from Ted Turner, and this was really a window into the future of what television was going to mean, because he wanted him for his television network, the Superstation, TBS. As a matter of fact, Andy Messerschmidt changed his number to 17, which is what the Superstation was on the cable channels, and he changed the name on the back of his uniform to Channel 17. Now, Major League Baseball made him change it to Messerschmidt, but that's where we were going at that time. And then a year later, Reggie Jackson signs a deal with the Yankees. Now, you think of Reggie, multi-million-dollar contract. Well, it was over a period of time. 1977, Reggie signed a 5-year deal for $3.5 million. Now, in today's dollars, that would be $15 million a year, which is a good number for a pretty good utility infielder. $3.5 million. Now, reports were that the Expos were willing to go to $5 million, and Reggie was smart. I mean, Reggie understood about being a star, and he once said, hey, if I played in New York, they'd name a candy bar after me, and they did. And so Reggie going to New York for less money. Now, $1.5 million difference, 1977 was a hell of a lot of money. That was generational money in those days. But he turned that down to go to New York because he understood what it meant to play in New York and be a part of a Yankee team that won back-to-back World Series. Pete Rose, 1979, December of 78, signed a contract to leave for the Phillies from the Reds. 4 years, $3.2 million. So we didn't quite get to the $1 million mark. Then a year later, Nolan Ryan left the Angels to sign with the Astros. 4 years, $4.5 million. Over $1 million a year. Wow. Wowza. Over $1 million a year for a baseball player? For a pitcher? Even George Steinbrenner said something to the effect of, oh, wow, now they've crossed the line. And here we are. And I was a working adult in those days. 45 years ago, I'd been in the working world for a couple of years. I was an adult. I'm an old man now, but man, $765 million. I guess, as Scott Van Pelt said, we should be numb to these numbers, and I guess we are. But it's really stunning in that, Ohtani was considered to be one of one, and he is. He is a unicorn. He got 700, and now he looks like a bargain for the Dodgers, who went on to the World Series. Can the Mets win the World Series with Soto? Maybe, but they got to spend more money. It's going to take some more cash to do that. There's a story from Tom Verducci today in SI.com who looked at this deal, and basically what it came down to was Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, was not going to be outbid. That was that. He goes on to talk about how Steve Cohen collects art. He writes, in 2020, when Cohen bought the Mets, Fortune magazine estimated his net worth to be about $14 billion. Today, it estimates his net worth to be $21.5 billion. So when your net worth goes up by a third in only 4 years, what's $765 million? He is now considered to be the 30th richest person in the United States and the richest owner in Major League Baseball. Now, the art, and this is where Verducci makes the comparison for going after Soto. And I think Scott Boras understands the ego of billionaires. This is how he got this done. This is how he got A-Rod to the Texas Rangers when Tom Hicks outbid everybody else by $100 million, and that's 25 years ago. $100 million to get the best player in the game. And he wasn't bidding really against anybody but himself, but Boras knew how to prey on the ego of Hicks to get him to have one of one, the best player in baseball at a very young age. I think he was similar age, 25, 26 years old when he made the deal, and wound up that he realized, hey, I've got this Hope Diamond here. I just can't surround it with enough talent to win, so he had to sell him off to the Yankees. Now, he writes, this is Verducci, Cohen began collecting art in 2000 when he was worth a mere $13 billion. Again, now he's worth $21.5 billion. He explained to Fortune magazine how he purchased art. I am purely from the gut, and I know right away. It stays in my brain. Let's say I go see a picture I keep thinking about it. I know it's something I like. If I forget about it, then I know I could care less. In 2019, Cohen could not stop thinking about Jeff Koons' Rabbit, a 3.5-foot steel cast of an inflatable plastic toy. He paid $91 million for it, the most ever paid for the work of a living artist. It joined the works of the likes of Warhol, Picasso, and others in his collection that years ago was worth $1 billion. Who knows what it's worth now? And Verducci writes, nobody was going to outbid Cohen, as he proved by going to an average annual value of $51 million, 3.5 more than the Yankees were putting on the table. $51 million. Still not quarterback money. There are quarterbacks that are making more, 55, 60, but those deals are not guaranteed. All this money, all 765, God forbid there's a career-ending injury in the first day of spring training, he gets all the money. That's the way it works. It's pointed out that when Soto is 33 years old, he will have 8 years and $400 million left on his contract. The collective, but here's the other thing. Clearly, the haves and the have-nots have really separated themselves out. Not to say you can't win a World Series with a reasonable salary base. You could do that, but with the Dodgers and the Mets, they're playing a different game than everybody else. Clearly, now the collective bargaining agreement expires after the 2026 season. It's in the best interest of the players to have multiple teams that are in the bidding wars, right? I mean, you can't just have two teams bidding because then everybody else goes, well, look at what the Nationals are doing. They're spending bupkis. They Keibert Ruiz they're going to be their highest paid player next year at $5 million a year. Soto's making that more than that, twice as much per week. Per week, he's making almost $10 million, making $10 million per week. More from Verducci's column. There's no replacing Soto. In a year that Aaron Judge was the unanimous American League MVP, he saw more pitches in the strike zone than he ever saw before. Ever since the Yankees whiffed on Bryce Harper, they needed a left-handed power bat to complement Judge. They finally got the bat in Soto. The result was 99 homers between the two of them this past year. So how they're going to replace that, we'll see. I also wonder about Soto, who was playing in a perfect place in Yankee Stadium with that short right field porch and having Aaron Judge behind him. Is it worth it for an extra few $1 million to go across town to the Mets? Yeah, I guess so. It obviously was. It's obviously something that Scott Boras wanted. And if you're Steve Cohen, who's been playing second fiddle to the Yankees pretty much since he bought the Mets in 2020, tried to spend money on, pitchers like Scherzer and Verlander. It didn't work out for him. He now steals what they call the back page in New York, the tabloids. They're touting the Mets. They took one away from the Yankees. Mets have been around since 1962. They have always been second fiddle to the Yankees. And when they met in the World Series, it was a lopsided series. Yankees won in 5. So, this is a big deal for them. The other thing about this, and it's pointed out that part of the reason that Soto wanted to play for the Mets, and I don't believe long-term it's going to be better for him than playing for the Yankees. I don't. But there was a meeting that took place last month, and it took place in one of Cohen's California homes. And this was different than the other teams who met with him at the hotel. And according to sources, during the meeting, Cohen spoke about his background, his relationships, and what has made him successful. And he told free agents that he views his ownership as a civic duty. He's in it to win in the long haul. He's looking to do what it takes to build a perennial winner. Not to be too Pollyannish, but that's the sense I get from the ownership of the Commanders right now. Yeah, Josh Harris makes money. He's a billionaire many times over, and he's doing fine. But I think he's also looking at this as a civic duty. It's a team he grew up rooting for. His family's from Washington. Same thing with the Rails. And I think that there really is some sincerity there from Cohen, who's a New Yorker, grew up a Mets fan, and is now living out his boyhood dream, purchasing one-of-a-kind items for one hell of a lot of money. Woo. Going to make the shift to football coming up. We'll get to more on this deal later on in the show. But up next, Booger McFarland, who was on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday, explained the dilemma that the San Francisco 49ers are facing with Brock Purdy. We'll get to that, and speaking of money, that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bunch of interesting stuff to get to today. I don't know if you read the story in the Post yesterday from Fred Frommer about this today being the 50th anniversary of John Lennon showing up on Monday Night Football and talking to Howard Cosell, and in what was about a 90-second interview, Cosell tried to coax him into getting the Beatles back together. I mean, this was 1974. They'd been broken up for 4 or 5 years at that point. They'd gone on to solo careers, and he and McCartney especially had done very well in the meantime. And here's Cosell trying to talk him back. And tragically, it was almost exactly 6 years to the day. It was a day short of the 6th anniversary of this interview that John Lennon was shot dead in front of his New York apartment. And it was Howard Cosell who broke the news. Things were different then. There was no social media, of course. There was no cable channels, no 24-hour news like CNN. And I guess ABC got the news early. Otherwise, I'm sure the other stations would have broken in. But Monday Night Football in 1974 was such a phenomenon that I would say that 2/3 of the television sets in use were watching Monday Night Football, and it was a big thing that Cosell broke the news of John Lennon's death. That is how most people found out about it. And you know, there was radio, of course. I don't know how many people were listening to radio at night. And other than Jimmy Breslin in the New York Post, in those days they had deadlines. And my friend Tom Lavero says it's the greatest deadline column ever written, that Jimmy Breslin actually got in the police car that took John Lennon to the hospital. And Breslin in the car says, "Are you John Lennon?" And he said, "Yes." I mean, that was an unbelievable night, and it was what, 44 years ago yesterday, and today is the 50th anniversary of the Lennon appearance on Monday night. And I'll get to that in the next hour. Some football here, and you know, we all remember. So of us of a certain age remember, and it's been played up, of course, in anniversaries and so forth. But Herman Edwards scooping up the Joe Pisarcik fumble in a game that the Giants had won. All they had to do was take a knee, and they would beat the Eagles. But Pisarcik mishandled a handoff to Larry Zonka. The ball came loose. Herman Edwards picked it up, and it's called the Miracle at the Meadowlands. Week later, the Giants are playing at home, and there's a banner that flies over the stadium, and it says, 15 years of lousy football, we've had enough. December 10th of 1978. So the 46th anniversary of that is tomorrow. Yesterday, before the Giants went out and dropped to 2-11, losing in the most giant of ways, playing the New Orleans Saints with a 35-yard field goal that sent it into overtime. The kick was blocked, and they fell to 2-11 with the 14-11 loss. And they asked Malik Neighbors, the star rookie receiver for the Giants, you know, played with Jaden Daniels at LSU, played with him at LSU last year. They asked him about the plane that flew over the stadium before the game, and it said to John Mara, "Please fix this dumpster fire." Malik Neighbors said, "I ain't pay for the plane." Translation: I agree with exactly what was on the banner, but I didn't pay for it. I ain't pay for the plane. That is going to go down in lore of Giants history. That you know, when they reached rock bottom this year to 2-11, that he said, "I ain't pay for that plane." It goes down with the Michael Ray Richardson quote about the then New Jersey, or maybe they were New Jersey Nets. He said the ship be sinking, or maybe they were the Knicks, one of the other New York teams. Forget which one he was playing for, but he said the ship be sinking. I ain't pay for the plane. Wow. Meantime, San Francisco 49ers, they got back on track yesterday. They played a really bad Bears team at home. I mean, this is what's going on with Caleb Williams now. You know, he didn't throw any picks yesterday, but he does not look good, does not look confident with a bad team around him. He was 17 of 23, not too bad, but for only 134 yards. And in the first half, they had 9 yards of offense. And Brock Purdy and the 49ers were humming yesterday against a deflated Bears team. Let's face it, Matt Eberflus got fired after the disaster that took place in Detroit on Thanksgiving Day, and they're just playing out the string. But Purdy yesterday threw for 325 yards and a couple of touchdowns in the 38-13 win. But he's coming up for a contract because he was not a first-round pick that he does not have the fifth-year option for the team to pick up. So he's coming to the end of his rookie deal, making bupkis. I think he's making less than $1 million since he was the last pick of the draft. And the question is, do you pay him? And do you pay him the going rate? That is a real dilemma for the 49ers, who know they've got a guy who's pretty good. He may be at the Kirk Cousins level, but he ain't Patrick Mahomes. So Booger McFarland on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday wrestled with this question, as Dan put it to him.
It's kind of like I did my wife. I strung her along for 9 years until I finally, got the courage enough to ask her to marry me. And she still brings it up. And, in all seriousness, I think if you're John Lynch, you have to kind of maybe do the Jordan Love deal. Maybe you give him like a 2-year, $40 million, something like that. I don't think Brock's representatives are going to accept that, but you got to at least try, because the moment they give him $55 million a year, I think their window is absolutely closed, because he's not the type of quarterback, as we're seeing now with all the injuries, he's not the type of quarterback that can make everybody around him better. He's the type of quarterback that if all the pieces are there, he is a tremendous game manager. And when all those pieces have been there, he has been outstanding. But no Ayuk, no McCaffrey, no Trent Williams. They get their brains beat in by Buffalo, because Purdy is not the guy that can rise anybody up. He needs the pieces around him. Very similar to John Stockton. Like, John Stockton is a Hall of Fame point guard, as long as he had Karl Malone. You take away Karl Malone, he's just another guy. And so I think that's what Brock Purdy is.
Well, I don't know if Stockton would be just another guy, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, Stockton.
He wouldn't be who he is with Karl Malone.
He wouldn't have 15,000 assists, but not all 15,000 were to Karl.
I got you.
You can't put John Stockton in with Brock Purdy, but I know I know the analogy you're making, but you do need other players. Brock needs more players. Without McCaffrey, his record is not good at all. I just don't know of how much do you pay somebody who's a game manager? That's what I think it comes down to.
Well, essentially, that's what the quarterback position is outside of Patrick, Josh, Joe Burrow, and Lamar. Everybody else is a game manager. Like, that's what everybody else is. And so I think Brock Purdy, although he may be kind of lower to middle end, other words, I'm going to give you an example of a high-end game manager. So like Jared Goff. Jared Goff is a high-end game manager. I don't think Brock Purdy is to that level just yet. Jordan Love is growing to that point. And so you have some young guys that are going to be able to ascend to that top tier. I think Jaden Daniels eventually will be in the Lamar Patrick category eventually. And so you got to pay him the going rate, Dano. I mean, the going rate is $55 million a year.
I can't do that.
Okay, well then who's going to be your quarterback then?
I have to say to him just what you said, what the Packers did with Jordan Love. Even though Jordan hadn't really produced anything, they wanted to keep him and still see if he was going to be a franchise quarterback. Brock Purdy.
And what if he says no?
Well, you found him at the end of the draft. I'm going to ask you to find somebody again. They've done a great job at finding players in the draft. But at 55, then I can't keep everybody. Does McCaffrey even play anymore, Booger? I don't know. Debo is banged up all the time. How long does Trent Williams continue to play? You bring up the point. The window is, if not closed, there's just a little breeze coming in, and it's not a lot. Not a lot.
Well, here's the thing, is that this is a business, and you have to capitalize when the iron is hot, and his iron will be no hotter than it's ever been after this season. I think if you're his agent, I think you're gonna go in asking for $55 million a year, 5 years, $275 million, 120 guaranteed. If you're John Lynch, you got to make a decision, because if you start over and try to go find another quarterback, you're probably gonna be without Trent Williams. You're probably gonna be without McCaffrey. You're probably gonna be without Debo. Fred Warner may still have a few years left. So the 49ers team that you know now, by the time you find that young guy, will be different. And so you have to balance. Do you pay him now, or do you start over and realizing that you're going to lose your nucleus? That's why John Lynch is making the big bucks in San Francisco. He's got to make that decision.
Oh, the old O. Henry story, the gift of the Magi. The man sold his pocket watch to buy combs for his wife, who sold her hair to to buy a chain for the pocket watch for her husband. I mean, what do you do there? Now, the Jordan Love comparison, it's a little bit different. When they had to make a decision on Love, he hadn't played. Aaron Rodgers was still doing great things for Green Bay, so he had not really taken the field very much, and they had to make a decision with his contract being extended, and they came up with a short-term deal. Purdy's already taken a team to a Super Bowl. He's took another team to the NFC Championship game. I don't think he's going to do either one this year, but he's got some history. He's got a resume there. And we've also seen enough of his warts to know exactly what Booger and Dan are talking about, that, yeah, he's really good if you got good parts around him, but if you're asking him to carry a team, and I think you see that in teams around the league. I mean, San Francisco got to the Super Bowl because of all the parts and Brock Purdy, whereas Kansas City, and they have some great players too, but it's Patrick Mahomes. You know, that's really what makes them tick, and it's 9 straight division titles. I know they escaped with another narrow one last night. Harrison Butker was hurt. The punter did the kicking. He banged it off the upright, and it went inside the goalpost, and they won another game by the hair of their chinny chin. But they wrapped up their 9th straight division title, and they do it year after year after year because they got the guy. And San Francisco has to identify, is this going to be the guy who can drag us along when we need him to, or do we move on and look for somebody else and not overpay him? It's an interesting dilemma. A little bit of college football here from Booger McFarland. This is on Deion Sanders and all the drama now about Sheduer. Is he going to wind up playing for the Raiders, who look like they're going to be at the top of the draft? The Giants are in contention to be at the top. They're going to draft a quarterback. Maybe they take Sheduer. But Sheduer put out something on Instagram indicating that he'd like to be in Vegas, like shots of Vegas. And then it becomes the question of, is this a package deal where Deion, who has always followed his sons, Shiloh and Sheduer, he's been with them every step of the way, from high school to an HBCU in Jackson State and now to Colorado. And is he going to make the next step with them to the NFL? Booger McFarland weighing in on that and how he sees that playing out.
Sheduer to the Raiders is something that I believe is going to happen. Deion to the Raiders, I don't think it's going to happen, because if Deion goes to the Raiders, you would have to get Deion there first based on the hiring cycle. Because if they're going to move on from Antonio Pierce, they would do that, January the 15th or whatever that day is, Black Monday. Deion, the draft's not till, end of April. And so that time gap there, I think, would probably prohibit the quote-unquote package deal from happening.
Yeah.
I think Brady's influence is probably going to lead to Antonio Pierce not being there. I think Brady's influence is going to lead to Sheduer being drafted, franchise quarterback. We're going to get an offensive mind in there, and we're going to go from there. I think Brady buying in was, hey, if you want to help us run the organization, put some skin in the game. He put skin in the game. Now he gets to make decisions, and because now he's got his money where his mouth is. And so I'm with you. I think Sheduer to the Raiders somehow, some way is going to happen. Deion, I don't think so, because Deion it's kind of like this. Deion can influence and control the University of Colorado the way he wants to, very much like Nick Saban did at Alabama.
Yep.
Nick Saban in the NFL did not work. I don't know if Deion in the NFL will work to the level that it's working at Colorado. Therefore, I think he's going to be at Colorado. I think he's going to build a juggernaut. He's going to be in the Big 12. He's got to win a couple big games a year. I mean, this is not even his best team. They're 9-3 this year, and you could argue that if they get a break against Kansas or something like that, they could be in the playoff.
Yep.
Like, he was really one game from the playoff.
Yep.
And so if you're Deion, you load up. He had a really good recruiting class, and Deion will be in the 12-team playoff next year. Why would he go to the NFL and get his head beat in? Because the NFL game is not about recruiting. It's just about draft order, salary cap, all those different things. I don't think he wants to deal with that.
I agree with you that, and this is why being in the Big 12, to me, if I'm a school, I would want to be in the Big. If I'm coaching, I want to be in the Big 12. I don't care who I'm playing each week, as long as I'm beating them each week. I got an automatic berth. I'm in. I mean, instead of banging around in the SEC and the Big Ten, all of that, I mean, Deion can run that.
All that makes sense. but there's two things that neither one is taking into account. I don't know if Booger has kids. I know Dan has 4 kids. And the part about being a dad here may play a factor. If there can be a package deal where Sheduer and Deion go to the same place, could be Dallas, could be New York, the Giants, who knows, could be Vegas. That may be too strong of a pull. And Deion has already talked about this. You know, they're going to play in the Alamo Bowl against BYU. Yawn, yawn. Not going to be in the playoff. And I'll have a thought on that in a moment. But he's already talked about how it's going to hurt his heart that he's going to be coaching his sons for the last time. Well, is he? You know, can he move on to the next phase, the next level of football, and coach him in the NFL? Yeah, that might be on the table. And when push comes to shove, and I have a son, I have a daughter, I know what it's like to be a parent. You do anything for your kids. And if you have an opportunity to do something that's incredible, you coach them at every level, high school, college, and pros, it might be a pull. This is what I talked about with Bill Belichick, and I've seen it reported now over the weekend. This could be in play, that his name is being associated with North Carolina. Now, nobody who's ever played for him believes he can coach college football. Just his style is not going to work, especially now in the NIL era where you have to recruit your own players to stay. That's just not the way he does business. But he's got a son, Steve, who's a coach at Washington. And if he's got a succession plan that North Carolina would agree to, where he coaches the team for, let's say, 2 years and then gets his son ready to coach, that could be in play. So I would not discount the idea that, yes, he could stay at Colorado. And as Dan Patrick says, he'd be in a conference where he can beat the brains out of just about everybody, out-recruit everybody, and get himself in the playoff most year with a roster that would continually improve. But fathers and sons, kids, I mean, that's something that you cannot discount, and I think that has to be considered there. Mikey S, the defensive back for the Commanders. I'll get his name down. I got Tua Tagovailoa. I can get Mikey Sainsristil at some point, but he was on Friday, I should say, on the Rich Eisen show. Talked about the progress of his rookie year, playing with Jaden Daniels, et cetera, et cetera. We'll get to that and more. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram's coming up at 11 o'clock. All the baseball news is swallowed up by the Juan Soto contract, 15 years, $765 million to the Mets. This is enormous news in New York. The Yankees don't lose out to the Mets on something like this, ever. And it happened last night, as Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, was not going to be outbid on that. But there's another baseball story which should get more attention, and maybe will as we get closer to the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, which I guess take place, is it July? Yeah, July 27th in Cooperstown. And two guys I think who are long overdue are getting in. I'm always railing about the Pro Football Hall of Fame with guys falling through the cracks, including my friend Joe Jacoby. Dave Parker is in finally, and Dick Allen, or as they used to call him, Richie Allen, has finally gotten in. He's passed away, but Parker is still alive, and he said he cried when he got the news. He got 14 of 16 votes from the Classic Era Committee, and Allen got 13 votes. You needed to get 75% to be inducted, so they're both getting in, and both were controversial players. I mean, Dave Parker was named in a report of cocaine use in the 1980s. That may have been a problem for him, and Allen was a guy who was difficult with the press from time to time. He had some issues with the fans in Philadelphia, though at times he was beloved, but he had great numbers. He hit 292 with 351 homers, over 1,000 RBIs from 1963 to 77 with the Phillies, the Cardinals, the Dodgers, the White Sox, and Oakland. He had a brother named Hank Allen. I don't know whether he's still alive, but Hank Allen played for the expansion Washington Senators. Was not as good as Richie Allen, but he was a major league player as well. And he was an seven-time All-Star, voted to the 1964 National League Rookie of the Year squad, and was the 1972 American League MVP. One thing about Richie Allen, or I guess he was Dick Allen by then, was with the White Sox. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, juggling a couple of baseballs coming out of the dugout, but he had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. I mean, think about that. That's a long time ago. That's probably 50 years ago. But at that time, it was, there's a ball player smoking a cigarette and juggling baseballs. And Dave Parker is probably best known for an all-star game where he rocketed a throw from right field to nail a runner at the plate. I forget the runner's name, but you can watch that on YouTube. He was a great, great player. Tommy John comes up short, and he didn't get to 300 wins, but he came close, like 280, something like that, 283. 17 wins short and not getting in the Hall of Fame, especially the way the numbers are now. I think he should get in, and maybe will next year, but he came in third, did not make it into the Baseball Hall of Fame. All right, Mikey Sainsristil. Oh, God, I'll learn this sooner or later. For all the whiffing that the Commanders' Washington football team did under Ron Rivera in the first round, 0 for 4 on the first-round picks, 2 of them cut this year. Looks like they're 2 for 2 at the top of the draft this year with what Jaden Daniels has done and what Mikey has done coming out of Michigan. As Nick Saban said, pound for pound, he's the best player in the draft and certainly has not been a disappointment. He was on the Rich Eisen show on Friday talking about the development of his first year in the NFL.
It's gone fast. It's gone very fast. But I think part of that is because, we're having a lot of fun here. Everything from a staff standpoint to player standpoint, everybody in the building is just a cohesive unit. Everybody appreciates each other. Everyone has a genuine care for each other, and it makes the work environment so much easier to be a part of. And, as a rookie, I love where I am in terms of the people I'm around and, what we're planning on doing, as a team. It's the best case scenario I could have, been a part of.
And so Dan Quinn, how has he guided your personal ship to this point, Mike?
Coach Quinn he's phenomenal. He's all about ball, all about figuring out ways to, get guys better. And he's a true competitor. The way he talks, his passion behind what he does. There's 2 coaches that I'll always say I'll forever, want to play for. Coach Harbaugh and, Coach Quinn. Like, I just love how they're both wired. Coach Quinn, he's, like I said, he's a elite competitor, wants to be the best at what he does. And we see that each and every single day we go into the facility.
Well, I'm not going to ask you if you're hitting a rookie wall since you played 15 games last year, Mike. So you're not even at your complement of games that you played for Michigan last year and winning a national championship, but you also understand what it does take, even though you are a rookie, to finish strong. It's certainly in games where people are going to be looking at you to do such things. This past win over the Titans, what was going through that locker room leading to that, coming off of the losing streak you guys were on?
So, big shout out to Bobby Wagner. In our team meeting the Wednesday of that week, he he kind of just, he stood up in front of the room and was saying, like, listen, in order for us to get to where we want to go, we have to get back to doing the little things, get back to the basic fundamentals and just pretty much regroup, continue to have fun, continue having, appreciation for the little things that we go through, the small adversities that we go through, and, getting back to being disciplined, getting back to, like I mentioned, the basic fundamentals, because when it comes to, those games that we need to win later on in the season, those games are won because of the foundation that you set early on. And that's, the drill work, the team workouts, that's all of that is how much did you prepare yourself for the back end. You don't know what you're preparing for in the moment, but when you prepare at the championship level, that's when you become a champion. It's not the day a championship is played that you become a champion. It's what you did in the offseason to help yourself with that foundation for later on to have success.
I love that. I love that guy. Bobby Wagner is a Hall of Famer of Hall of Famers, period, end of story. He'll be first ballot when that happens. You got a good example of what it was like for you to realize first time you were on the back end, speaking of that word, of Bobby Wagner, one level behind him on the defense?
Yeah, I mean, he's exactly what you want. He embodies everything from, like you just said, he's a Hall of Famer. And, you know, he's just a great human being. And just to be able to have the experience that he has and the knowledge that he has as a rookie, being able to learn from someone like him, you know, how could you get it any better way? And there's no surprise that he's up for, you know, the Man of the Year award. Like I mentioned, he's a great human being, and he wants to see the people around him succeed. And he's going to challenge you to be the best version of yourself. And that's what he does each and every single day he comes in.
What's it like being around Jaden Daniels, Mike?
Awesome. Jaden's such a cool dude. You know, he's another one, elite competitor, wants to be the greatest. And, you know, I see the work ethic he has. He comes in the building every day, 5:30 in the morning. He's already walking through, you know, their calls for the week. You know, he shows up early, leaves late, takes care of his body well, does everything he needs to be to put himself in, you know, the position to be a great quarterback. And, you know, I love to see what he's doing right now. And he's a leader. And then, you know, he has that chip on his shoulder of, you know, he wants to be great.
Give me an example where you realized for the first time he was a cool customer. Whether it's on the field where you're ready to come back on the field, you think you're going to maybe come back on the field, and he's like, no, offense stays out here. You got one of those moments, Mike, throughout the season for you? Touchdown, maybe?
Shoot.
Anything that he did?
I think just him being able to, like, the plays he can create with his feet, and just being able to, I think he could scramble and throw it. He could scramble and run. But I'm gonna just go to, you know, Chicago Bears, last play of the game where, you know, he threw the Hail Mary pass. You know, defense, we just finished against, I think we gave a field goal or a touchdown, one of the two, but offense goes back out there. We all get on our feet and we're just watching the play develop. I'm right there on the sideline. I see him, you know, make one guy miss. He scrambles back left, makes another guy miss. Then he gets set to throw it. Ball goes up, and the first thing I think about, I'm like, wait, there's a chance. Like, there's a real chance that this ball might get caught. I'm watching the flight of the ball. I see it get to about the 2-3 yard line. Zach Ertz jumps up, and at first I thought he's the one that tipped it, but it was actually Stevenson, the corner there, who tipped it back. And once everyone landed, all you see is Noah Brown back there by himself. And I'm like, oh, snap. Like, I'm like, oh, snap. Did I really just witness this happen? And, like, you've seen it on TV before, Aaron Rodgers, but, like, to be on the winning side of that, it was amazing. It was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced as a football player.
I was there for that. That was unbelievable. Mike Sainsristil of the Commanders on the Rich Eisen show. And by the way, speaking of Aaron Rodgers, the Jets missed the playoffs. They're out officially after, again, blowing a lead, losing in Miami. And when you think of the magnitude of the disaster of Aaron Rodgers, just think about this, that every team in professional sports has made the playoffs at least once in the last 14 years, except the New York Jets. They are the only team not to do it. And they asked Rodgers about it after the game, and he goes, well, you know, I've only been starting here for 1 year, so I'm one of 14. Okay, whatever. But he was there to finally put an end to it, you know. Like, he was the missing piece. And we've seen this blow up before. You know, just when you think you're one guy away, it doesn't work out for you. And I think of the Herschel Walker trade where he was traded to the Minnesota Vikings, where they felt all we need is a great running back. They traded draft pick after draft pick and basically gave the foundation for Jimmy Johnson to build back-to-back championship teams, and really the third one is his too, that they won with Barry Switzer. And they did it by trading the one player who was supposed to be the missing piece, and he wasn't for the Minnesota Vikings, just as Aaron Rodgers was not for the New York Jets. But back to Sainsristil, this is interesting perspective from him because, if you don't know, he started out as a wide receiver at Michigan, and they switched him to defensive back. And it wasn't like, you know, he couldn't catch the ball, because, like, I love this Lovie Smith quote. Goes back to when he had Rex Grossman. And we know from when Rex Grossman played here, he was an interception machine. and he was always getting picked off. And they asked Lovie Smith, who was then coaching the Bears. He got them to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman. There ought to be a special award just for that, just getting to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman. Think about that. How many quarterbacks of that level ever made it to the Super Bowl? But they did. Their defense was good enough, and they had some other parts too. But one thing Lovie Smith said, he said, think about defensive backs. He says, I don't have a problem with a quarterback throwing into coverage. The reason that they are defensive backs is because they were wide receivers who couldn't catch the ball. And you think about that, like the first day of JV practice, and they ask you what position you want to play. Well, all the fast guys go over and they want to play wide receiver. They don't want to play defensive back, and they find out the ones who can catch the ball, and they become wide receivers, and the others who are fast, they become defensive backs. Well, in this case, you've got a player at Colorado who is one of the top receivers in the game, and also is one of the top defensive backs in the country, and that's Travis Hunter, who's probably going to win the Heisman. He should, because he's the best player in the game, and he rarely leaves the field for Colorado. So Sainsristil, who made the transition, he didn't do both at Michigan, but was a wide receiver who became a defensive back, was asked by Eisen, do you think it's possible that Travis Hunter could possibly go both ways in the NFL?
I want to say yes, because he's phenomenal at what he does. Like, it's not easy to play that many snaps. And clearly he has the condition for it. So I want to say yes. But at the same time, I feel like, once you do get to that, and once you're in the NFL, right, the season is much longer. And, I don't want to say it's more physical, but in a sense it is much more physical because it is, you're going against grown men. And I think it could be done. It might not be done with the same amount of snaps, but I think he can do it. And honestly, I'm rooting for him to do it. So I think if he's able to step into a NFL organization and produce at the high level, both sides of the ball that he's doing currently, that's going to be something, that will be spoken about for generations. So, I'm rooting for him.
Yeah, Deion did it to an extent. Deion also used to return kicks. But the year that Michael Irvin was suspended for the White House incident, remember the players of the Cowboys had a house, which they called the White House, and there was all kinds of things going on there. And anyway, he wound up with a suspension for that. And Deion filled in for the playmaker. Michael Irvin did some stints at wide receiver as well as playing defensive back. I think it's possible Hunter does it. The feeling is, and it'll be much like Deion, that he'll be a cornerback who can play wide receiver some. He may get, let's say 12 to 15 snaps a game at wide receiver, which is a lot, and they're probably going to be plays where he's a decoy running down the field. He's obviously an incredibly conditioned and very, very skilled athlete. But if he can pull off both ways, which nobody has done on a full-time basis since Chuck Bednarik did it for the Philadelphia Eagles in 1960, where he played linebacker and center. And as I understand it, the only reason he did it, he didn't do the whole season. I think it was about half the season. The starting center for the Eagles got hurt, and he filled in. So he never left the field. On changeovers. I guess he wasn't on the kickoff return, or maybe he was. I mean, rosters were limited then. But, yeah, if Travis Hunter can pull that off, that would be absolutely remarkable. I want to get to what happened 50 years ago today, and it was a really nice story about it in the Washington Post yesterday with Howard Cosell interviewing John Lennon at halftime of a game between the Redskins and the Los Angeles Rams. It was at the Coliseum on this day in 1974. I did watch most of the Maryland game yesterday against Purdue. I don't know how they schedule these things. At least they didn't schedule it up against a 1 o'clock Commanders game. So I was back and forth from the Red Zone channel. But a noon tip on a NFL Sunday, a game of this magnitude. It's a Big Ten game, two good teams, and Purdue is ranked 8. And Maryland went in there, and Purdue's a tough place to play. They made it to the final last year. They're good. And Zach Edey's gone, but they still got good players there. And this went back and forth, this game. Really, I think, good effort by Maryland in this game. And this guy, Derek Queen, if you haven't seen him play, see him while you can, as Kevin Willard says, because he's not going to be around there long. He's going to the NBA. He's the best big man they've had since Joe Smith. There's no question about that. And he may be the best player they've had since Grievous Vasquez. He's that good. And he yesterday had another double-double. He had 26 points. That's his fifth 20-point game of his freshman year. He also had 12 rebounds. That's his fourth double-double. He's a really skilled big man. He can play. And Purdue's got some guys who can play. And they got hot at the end of the game. Maryland missed some shots. This is the kind of game they needed to play almost a perfect game. They did not, but they played well. And this has got to be encouraging for Maryland. They've got a couple more tune-up games before the new year, and then they roll into full-time Big Ten play. They got St. Francis coming up a week from today. I guess they got exams in between. But this was a really good basketball game between two really good teams. And it's nice to see that, and you can do this now in the NIL era, though doing it with a freshman is kind of unusual in this day and age. Usually you're bringing in transfers from other places, and they've got transfers. They've got plenty of those, and they also have a fifth-year player on the team who's done. I guess it was fourth-year player who's done well. But Maryland, they look like a pretty good team this year. They really do, and they're not ranked right now. And I don't know if you get ranked off a loss. But look for them to get ranked down the road. Queen is a really good player. He's one of the best players in the country, and they're now fun to watch after a really rough year last year. They had a losing record, and Julian Reese coming back. It's his fourth year. Julian Reese. You got two guys who Reese fouled out yesterday, which hurt him as well. But two big men who can play. That's a luxury in college basketball. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.